state. In the cats, the life cycle is very similar, except for the teenagers, instead of wandering around the bloodstream, they wander around in the lungs, and they cause severe scarring. And over a period of years, that scarring continues. So you can have just a infection of heartworms now, and then 3 to 5 years later, they start coughing, even though they don't actively have an infection now. And that's because the scarring has continued and the inflammation has continued in the lungs, even though the heartworms aren't there. They can actually reduce their lung capacity by greater than 90%, which can make it very hard to breathe, as I'm sure you can imagine. And so it turns into a bad thing, very bad thing for cats. The other thing that's interesting with cats is because they're really good at killing the babies, or not the babies, but the adults, keeping the teenagers from getting that final development, oftentimes there's just single male infections. But that single male worm, when that male worm dies, can cause a sudden anaphylactic shock and collapse of the cat. So we used to think that dogs were the only thing that we need to worry about protecting. And we're now learning that cats get bitten just as often, and the scarring can happen just as bad, and it's important for us to treat and protect our cats as well. Normally, you want to start with a test, depending on the type of medication you're using. If you're using a medication that has some adulticide, which means it kills the adult heartworms, you need to make sure that there isn't any adults in the system before you start it, because the anaphylactic reaction that can happen when you kill an adult off, you want to know that that's a risk so that you can treat it and be aware. Other drugs, such as ivermectin, treat and kill only the babies. And so it's safe to use that in a case where you might have some adults or some intermediates, and you can start the drug at that point. In fact, to get the anaphylactic reaction down and lower when we are treating, oftentimes we'll start with a HeartGuard medication for 3 months to kill off all the babies and weaken that stage of the life cycle before we go into the killing of the adults that we need to when we have an infection.